There is something happening to your brain right now that you are so used to, you do not even recognize it as abnormal anymore. In the middle of the workday, your brain suddenly shuts down. It is not sleepiness, and it is not fatigue. It just feels thick. It is as if someone just dimmed your screen's brightness by half, without asking your permission. You look at the screen, you know what you need to do, but your brain refuses to start up. Or in the evening, when everything has quieted down, a type of anxiety with no specific reason begins to race through your mind. You are not worrying about anything specific. It is just a baseline state, restless, uneasy, and impossible to turn off. Or that thing you might have blamed on age. Your short-term memory is worse than it was 5 years ago. You walk into a room and forget what you went in there for. You put your keys down somewhere and cannot remember where. You are speaking a sentence and lose your words right in the middle. You have normalized all of those things. Here is what no one has told you. Those symptoms are not because of age. It is not from work stress, and it is not from a lack of sleep. They are signs, measurable by magnetic resonance imaging, of what added sugar is doing to the physical structure of your brain, meal by meal, for years. And over the next 13 minutes, we are going to go through each milestone of those 30 days when you eliminate added sugar. Not as a motivational speech, and not as a willpower challenge, but according to the exact neurology that happens inside your brain, by the day, not by the hour. And I am going to tell you exactly why day 21 is the point where your brain begins to repair itself in a way that science calls irreversible. Let us break it down. Here is what is truly happening inside your brain every single time you eat sugar. Your brain does not run on sugar in the simple sense that you were taught. It runs on regulated glucose, a steady stream of electricity, tightly controlled by multiple mechanisms at once. Added sugar does not provide extra fuel for your brain. It causes a voltage spike, a sudden sharp surge followed by a crash. It is just like plugging 220 volts directly into a device designed to run at 110. Each of those voltage spikes leaves a specific footprint: inflammation in brain tissue, especially in the prefrontal cortex, the area where you make decisions, control impulses, and do long-term planning. It reduces the insulin sensitivity of your neurons, making the brain need more and more glucose just to generate the same level of energy. And most importantly, it damages myelin, the insulating layer that protects your neural connections, slowing down the speed of signal transmission between brain regions. When you stop added sugar, your brain does not recover instantly. It has to rebuild its electrical grid from the ground up, and that process has its own timeline, by the day, not by the week or month, by the 8th minute. You will understand why day 21 is not a random number, and why stopping at day 20 does not give you any of what we are about to talk about. Day 1 to day 7 is when the system shakes. This is something that most people are not warned about beforehand, and that is why they give up at the wrong time. Added sugar triggers the nucleus accumbens, the reward center of the brain, through a dopamine mechanism identical to cocaine. This is not a metaphor, and it is not a loose comparison. Research from the Hobel Laboratory at Princeton University has directly recorded dopamine responses in the nucleus accumbens during sugar consumption, and it mirrors the pattern of classified addictive drugs. When you eat sugar regularly for years, your brain no longer produces dopamine at a normal baseline level. It has learned to wait for the spike from the outside. When that spike suddenly disappears, 3 things happen simultaneously in your brain. Baseline dopamine drops below normal levels. The brain is in a state of true neurochemical deficiency. Cortisol rises. The brain interprets the loss of a familiar reward source as a stressful situation requiring a response. And inflammation in brain tissue, especially in the prefrontal cortex, peaks around day 3 to day 5. Exactly when you feel your worst. You will feel it clearly and uncomfortably. A dull headache, especially after meals, and an unexplained low mood. It is harder to concentrate than usual. Not because you are doing anything wrong, but because the brain is missing the dopamine spike it has grown accustomed to using as extra fuel. And sugar cravings are strongest in the afternoon and evening. This is when natural cortisol drops and the brain looks for a source to compensate. The most important thing about the first week is this: This is not your body depending on sugar in the sense of being weak or lacking discipline. This is neuroadaptation. The brain has re-architected its reward system around an artificial stimulus for years. Removing it creates a neurological response that is measurable, predictable, and clearly time-limited. You are not failing. You are experiencing exactly what biology dictates must happen. The first week is the withdrawal response, and week 2 is something no one warns you about because it is not worse. It is just quieter, and that silence is a trap. Day 8 to day 14 is the blind zone. This is the most dangerous week of the entire 30 days. It is not because it is hard, but because it is not hard enough to remind you why you are doing this. Inside your brain, critical things are happening that you have no way of feeling directly. The insulin sensitivity of neurons begins to recover. Brain cells are relearning how to use glucose efficiently instead of waiting for a spike. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor, the neural growth protein that neuroscientists call brain fertilizer, begins to rise gradually. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor is what determines whether your brain can create new connections, whether it can learn, and whether it can recover from damage. And inflammation in the prefrontal cortex begins to decrease, but not yet enough to make any perceivable difference. All that work is taking place beneath your threshold of awareness. What you actually feel is that the uncomfortable symptoms of week 1 are fading away. There is no noticeable improvement, no breakthrough moment, and no sign to let you know that what you are doing is working. And this is the trap that research from the Journal of Physiology has documented. The prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for long-term decisions, impulse control, and the ability to maintain commitments, is still in the process of recovering at this stage. This means that the very region of the brain you need to keep going is the region that is functioning at its worst. Your brain is making an assessment about whether or not to continue, using the exact part that has been damaged by the thing you are trying to eliminate. Day 14 is the easiest day to quit in the entire 30 days. And day 15 is the day your brain begins to do what neuroscience calls a neuroplasticity reset. Day 15 to day 21 is the neuroplasticity reset. 3 things happen simultaneously during this period, and their combination is why day 21 is different from everything that came before. First, brain-derived neurotrophic factor reaches its operational threshold. It has been rising since week 2, but around day 15 to day 17, it reaches a high enough concentration to trigger synaptogenesis, the process of creating new neural connections. More importantly, it triggers neurogenesis in the hippocampus, the brain region responsible for memory and learning. Your hippocampus begins to generate new brain cells. This is not a metaphor for rejuvenation. This is a biological process observable under a microscope, documented by research from the University of California, Davis on hippocampal neurogenesis and sugar restriction. Your brain is building new connections in a physical sense. Second, baseline dopamine recovers. Dopamine D2 receptors, which had been downregulated after years of overstimulation from added sugar, begin to resensitize. The brain's reward threshold shifts back to its natural position. As a result, you begin to feel pleasure from normal things that previously felt bland or insufficient: music, deep conversations, or the feeling of completing a task. This is not your emotions becoming stronger. This is your reward threshold returning right to the position it was designed to operate in. Research from Nature Neuroscience on the dopamine receptor recovery timeline confirms that this resensitization process begins to be measurable around day 14 to day 18, right within this time frame. Third, the prefrontal cortex reconnects with the amygdala. Inflammation in the prefrontal cortex decreases enough so that the connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, the center for processing emotions and stress responses, is restored. In reality, that means your impulse control improves, the loop of unprovoked anxious thoughts diminishes, and long-term decisions become less effortless. Research from Harvard Medical School on the link between sugar-induced brain inflammation and prefrontal cortex function recorded these changes within the 2 to 3 week window of sugar restriction. These 3 changes: Brain-derived neurotrophic factor, dopamine, and the prefrontal cortex happen simultaneously and reinforce each other. Higher brain-derived neurotrophic factor facilitates faster dopamine receptor recovery. Steadier dopamine reduces cortisol. Lower cortisol reduces inflammation in the prefrontal cortex. And a better functioning prefrontal cortex helps you maintain the choices that increase brain-derived neurotrophic factor even more. This is the first positive feedback loop your brain creates in this process. This is the signal most people miss because they gave up on day 14. But day 21 is just the starting point of the final week, and the final week is where internal changes become things you can measure from the outside. Day 22 to day 30 is the new brain. In this final week, myelin repair, the process of regenerating the insulating layer of neural connections, is happening at a speed that can create a perceivable difference. The speed of signal transmission between brain regions increases. In practice, that means you think faster, connect ideas more quickly, and respond to new information with less delay. Baseline cortisol drops to a level where the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the body's stress axis, rebalances. That does not mean you no longer experience stress. It means you are no longer in that chronic baseline stress state that added sugar maintained through the loop of spikes and crashes. And the glymphatic system, the brain's cleaning system that operates primarily during deep sleep, begins to work more efficiently as brain inflammation decreases. The glymphatic system is responsible for clearing away amyloid beta and tau proteins accumulated during the day, substances that, if accumulated too much over the years, researchers linked cognitive decline in old age. When this system works at full capacity, your brain is cleaning itself every night the way it was designed to. You will recognize these changes in very specific ways. Short-term memory improves noticeably. This is a direct sign of a better functioning hippocampus. The ability to concentrate lasts longer without needing caffeine to sustain it. Sleep is deeper, and there is a feeling of being truly rested upon waking. And your mood stabilizes horizontally. No more artificial peaks of euphoria after a sugary meal and mild valleys of depression 90 minutes later. After 30 days, your brain is not just working better. It has a different physical structure, more connections, less inflammation, and a reward system responding to the real world instead of an artificial signal. Now, here is what you actually need to do to make those 30 days happen. Step number 1 is distinguishing added sugar from natural sugar, because this is the confusion that breaks most efforts. Natural sugar in whole fruit comes with fiber. Fiber slows down the absorption of glucose, preventing the voltage spike from occurring. The brain receives glucose, but it receives it in a steady stream, not a spike. This is why an apple does not create the same neurological response as a can of soda, even though the amount of sugar in both may be equivalent. Added sugar, sucrose, high fructose corn syrup, maltodextrin, dextrose, and dozens of other names, enters the blood without a fiber filter. The spike happens immediately. The simplest label reading rule is to add up all ingredients with names ending in "ose" and syrup. If the total exceeds 5 grams per serving, that is a significant source of added sugar. And the 4 most important hidden sources that most people do not expect are canned tomato sauce, fruit-flavored yogurt, industrial white bread, and boxed fruit juice, even the type labeled as 100% natural. Step number 2 is a 3-phase protocol designed specifically for the brain. The brain needs steady glucose, not a lack of glucose. The goal is not to eliminate carbohydrates. The goal is to stabilize the supply so the brain does not face voltage spikes. From day 1 to day 7, replace added sugar with complex carbohydrates, sweet potatoes, whole oats, and quinoa. The brain receives glucose, but it receives it from a source containing fiber and digesting slowly, so the spike does not happen. Withdrawal still occurs because dopamine is still rebalancing, but the brain is not starved of fuel during that process. From day 8 to day 21, add healthy fats to every meal: avocado, olive oil, and omega-3 from fatty fish. The brain begins to learn how to use ketones as an alternative fuel source alongside glucose. That creates metabolic flexibility. The brain is no longer completely dependent on a single fuel source. From day 22 to day 30, add a light intermittent fasting period of 12 to 14 hours. Skip late-night snacking and leave a gap between dinner and breakfast the next morning. This long enough period without eating triggers natural brain-derived neurotrophic factor production and enhances the glymphatic cleaning process during sleep. Step number 3 includes 3 foods that accelerate brain recovery. Blueberries. Anthocyanins in blueberries are among the few compounds that can cross the blood-brain barrier and directly impact brain tissue. Research from the University of Reading shows that regular consumption of blueberries stimulates brain-derived neurotrophic factor production and reduces brain inflammation at a measurable level. It is not blueberry flavor or blueberry extract. It is real blueberries, fresh or frozen, fatty fish salmon, sardines, and mackerel. Docosahexaenoic acid. The long-chain omega-3 is a primary structural component of neural cell membranes and of myelin. Without enough docosahexaenoic acid, myelin repair cannot occur at an optimal speed, no matter how many other conditions are met. Your brain cannot produce docosahexaenoic acid on its own. It must come from food. Dark chocolate with more than 85% cacao. Flavonoids in dark chocolate increase blood flow to the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus, the 2 most important regions in this recovery process. It is not milk chocolate, and it is nothing under 85%, because below that threshold, the amount of added sugar is enough to cancel out the effects of flavonoids. Step number 4 is tracking day 21, with 3 specific indicators that you do not need devices to measure. Working memory. On day 1, try to remember a list of 7 random items without notes after 10 minutes. Repeat on day 21. The improvement here is a direct sign of a better functioning hippocampus. Mood stability after meals. Rate your mood from 1 to 10 at 30 minutes after each meal for 3 consecutive days on day 1 and on day 21. A narrowing of the fluctuation range is a sign that baseline dopamine is recovering. Sleep onset, the time from lying down to sleeping. If it drops from 30 minutes or more down to under 15 minutes by day 21, it is a sign that baseline cortisol is returning to normal and the glymphatic system is preparing to operate in its proper cycle. Now you have the translation. We are taught that sugar is a weight problem, a teeth problem, or a diabetes problem. No one tells you that sugar is a brain problem. No one tells you that each voltage spike is leaving an inflammatory footprint in your brain tissue, or that each artificial dopamine spike is lowering your reward threshold until the normal things in life are no longer enough to feel good, or that the prefrontal cortex, the brain region that makes you the person you want to be, the brain region responsible for every critical decision you make, has been operating in a state of chronic inflammation for years. And no one tells you that all of that is reversible in 30 days. It is not by drugs, and it is not by devices. It is by eliminating something the food industry has embedded into 74% of products on supermarket shelves. Your brain is not aging faster. It is operating in the wrong environment. Your body is not broken. It is responding to what you put in. Change the input, and the system changes accordingly. That is not motivation. That is neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity does not care about your age or how long you have been doing this. The question is not whether your brain can recover. The question is whether you will give it until day 21. Comment decode below if any of these symptoms, the midday thick brain, unprovoked anxiety, or a worse short-term memory than before, are what you have normalized and never connected to sugar. I read every single comment. And the next video decodes what happens to your heart while you are sleeping, specifically between 2 and 4 in the morning, when your blood pressure is following one of 2 completely different patterns. One pattern is cleaning and repairing your arteries every night, and one pattern is silently accelerating arterial damage while you do nothing at all. Most people do not know which group they belong to, and the conventional blood pressure test that your doctor measures at the clinic cannot distinguish between those 2 groups, because it only measures one point in time during the day, while the problem happens while you are asleep.